So, very good evening, dear students. Now we are going to study today lesson number 4. Now, this is actually a very important component of our earlier chapter, which we were earlier lessons which we have studied. Now, today we are going to understand what is the classification of bacteria and archaea, what was in the past, what is in the present, and what is in the future. So, again, coming back to that very important, what was the history of classification, just to remember what was actually, can we again refresh, and this will help us to understand that how our the classification of bacteriology has evolved. So my whole objective to give you all these lessons and teaching was that we really need to understand that how the bacterial taxonomy started in the beginning and what is the present. Since you all know that it is already in your syllabus, where you people have to study that what is the, actually you need to know that what are the what is the basically the character, how it has the phytopathogenic bacteria have been characterized, how they have been studied, and what are the current trends in the taxonomy. So all these, actually this chapters, the four lessons are including all what is required in the taxonomy, so that you can really understand what are the current approaches for the characterization and the identification of phytopathogenic bacteria. Now if we just see that there has been a big change right from the late 19th century, in the beginning, where the first in the early years or the beginning of the 19th century, the bacterial taxonomy was actually, as you see, that Ferdinand and Cohn in 1872, he was the first to classify the 6 genera as a members of the plants, which were mainly based on the morphology. However, at that time, most scientists, they were interested in the description of pathogenic bacteria. Now, many of these pathogenic bacteria known today were described between 1880 and 1900. So, at that time, besides morphology, growth requirements and pathogenic potential were the most important taxonomic markers. So at the beginning of the 20th century, more and more physiological biochemical data came into the existence besides the morphology. So they became as the important markers for the classification and identification of the microorganism. And as you all know, the numerous biochemical and physiological properties of the bacterial cultures were also determined for the characterization and identification. Later, enzymes were studied, different metabolic pathways were studied, and the first edition of the Burgess Manual of Determinative Bacteriology as classified in 1923, that was based on the phenotypic properties as typically unicellular plants, the so-called schizomycetes. Even in the 7th edition of Burgess Manual, if you see, which was published in 1957, bacteria were still classified as the members of the plants, that is Protophyta, primitive plants. So based on the now you understand that how it has evolved actually. So based on the partial sequences of 16S ribosomal RNA genes, archaea, which was originally named as Archaeobacteria, were first classified as a separate kingdom in 1977. The French protistologist Edouard Quéton, the mentor and long-time colleague of A. Wolff, mentioned for the first time in 1925 that two categories of prokaryotes and eukaryotes, but only to distinguish prokaryotic from eukaryotic protists. So they had actually differentiated the two. However, his proposal did not become generally known. Later, Wolff propagated this distinction and finally convinced R. Stenier, together with C. B. Van Niel in 1962, to describe a detailed and well accepted division of prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. Okay, so in the 8th edition of Burgess Manual, which was published in 1974, bacteria were no longer considered as plants and were recognized as members of the kingdom Prokaryotae. However, all former ideas about phylogeny and relationships were discarded, and bacteria were arranged in groups based mainly on the Gram-Stein morphology and oxygen requirement. So now in this table 1, if you see that it was in late 19th century What was the classification mainly was based on what? Morphology, growth requirements and pathogenic potential. Now if you come to 1900 to 1960, it was based on morphology, physiology and biochemistry. Then 1960, 1980, chemotaxonomy, numerical taxonomy, DNA hybridization. Then from 1980 till today, genotypic analysis, multilocus sequence analysis, average nucleotide identity and whole genome analysis. Okay, so this is how the taxonomy, or I would say that the history of the classification has been divided into various time periods, time span. Now what is actually, when we are going through all this reliable classification system, and I am talking about so much about this classification system, what is a reliable classification system? So what is it actually? It is a prerequisite for scientists and professionals who are dealing with the microorganism in order to keep track of the tremendous variety. The ultimate objective of biological classification is the characterization and orderly arrangement of organisms into groups. Classification is often confused with identification, but it is not identification. It is as a matter of fact what? Classification is a prerequisite for identification. Got the point? Okay. Now let us come to the approaches what has been evolved actually. When I was talking about history, it was in a brief actually, although I have already given you the lesson on the history. I just wanted to briefly explain. Now when we come back to what were the different approaches actually from the beginning, actually they have been taken care of. What did the scientists actually, how did they do it? So number one was numerical taxonomy, which was based on what? Phonetic analysis. Okay, the phonetic analysis and all this I have already taken in the previous lessons. So I have already given you terms, so that now these terms will come in between in these lectures. So kindly go back to those lessons and see those terms, and then you can very well understand. Now coming to the numerical taxonomy, what actually happened, that numerical taxonomy, it improved phenotypic identification by increasing the number of tests used and by calculating the coefficients of phonetic similarities between strains and species. Okay, between the strains and the species. It was Neath and Sokal in 1973 who gave this information, that the numerical taxonomy has improved the phenotypic, how numerical taxonomy was improved and what was the basis actually. For numerical studies, the results are tabulated in a table of T organisms versus N characters, and the term OTU, operational taxonomic unit, is used for an individual strain. The characters are equally weighted and should come from the various categories of properties. What are those properties? Morphology, physiology and biochemistry. The number of common characteristics is considered as a quantitative measure of taxonomic relatedness. So what are those common characters? They are what are considered as what? They are considered as quantitative measure. Remember, I am talking about numerical taxonomy. So that means it is, we are doing something, we are doing large number of tests, and then based on those quantity only, quantitative measures, we are doing the taxonomic relatedness. Although this does not mean that the organisms are also phylogenetically related. So this is the important thing. Actually, if you all want, I will be maybe in future I will give you the details, like how we do the numerical taxonomy. I think I will take a separate lecture on this, but this is just for your reference, that what exactly happened in the beginning. Now coming to next, chemotaxonomy. Chemotaxonomy, another very very important aspect. So first is the numerical taxonomy, which is based on the what? Improved phenotypic identification by increasing the number of tests, like by calculating the coefficient of phonetic similarities between the strains and the species. Okay, so this was the main objective in the numerical taxonomy. Now what is chemotaxonomy then? Now chemotaxonomy and what exactly happened in this. So since we are discussing what happened in past and what happened in present and what will happen in the future, actually it is a very important, we need to understand, because when we go for the taxonomical aspects, we need to understand that how we will do it further, and what are the facilities available with us. Maybe we do those, we study based on that, those facilities only. But theoretically, at least you people should know. Now, the chemical composition of cell constituents is a useful property for improving the classification and identification of prokaryotes. Chemotaxonomic methods are widely used for those groups of prokaryotes where morphological and physiological characters have largely failed or have not been enough to provide a satisfactory classification. Okay, so if what does it mean actually? If we are not having the sufficient methodologies or sufficient systems, then we are doing this chemotaxonomy. Now, the DNA base composition, that is guanine, cytosine, GC content of DNA, is one of the required characteristics on the minimum list of data needed for the description of a new genus. However, it is only an exclusively determinant in the classification of bacteria, in that two strains differing by more than 10 molecular percentage should not be, this is 10 mole percent, sorry, this is 10 mole percent, should not be considered as members of the same genus, whereas on the other hand, a similar DNA base composition does not necessarily imply that the two strains are closely related. Okay, hope you are understanding. In practice, it has proved to be a valuable character for distinguishing between non-related bacteria such as Staphylococci 30-35 mole percentage GC and Micrococci 70-75 mole percentage GC. Okay, so are you all getting it? Now I proceed further. The occurrence of alkyl glycerol, either lipids instead of fatty acid, ester lipids, is a very characteristic property of archaea and can be used for distinguishing them from bacteria and eukarya. Bacteria contain a wide variety of fatty acids, unbranched or branched fatty acids, hydroxy fatty acids, cyclopropane fatty acids, saturated and unsaturated ones. Most fatty acids of bacteria are in the range of C12 to C20. You know this is no C12 carbon 12 to carbon 20. Now, fatty acid patterns can be determined rather easily and quickly, and automatic identification is even possible. However, the bacteria must be cultivated under carefully controlled conditions, since fatty acid patterns may alter in response to exogenous and endogenous parameters such as growth temperature, pH, composition of the medium, or age of the culture. So now this was depending on the lipids. Now we are coming to the other group, that is called isoprenoid quinones. What are isoprenoid quinones? They also play an important role in electron transport. Now, different bacteria not only synthesize different quinone types, ubiquinone, menaquinone, dimethylmenaquinones, but the length and the degree of saturation of polyprenyl side chains are of considerable value in classification. The cyanobacteria contain neither ubiquinones nor menaquinones, but phylloquinones and plastoquinones, which are normally associated with the green plants. Most strictly aerobic. Now, I can repeat again, the cyanobacteria contain neither ubiquinones nor menaquinones, but phylloquinones and plastoquinones, which are normally associated with green plants. Okay, so I come back to the same. Which are normally associated with green plants. So, most strictly aerobic gram-negative bacteria produce only ubiquinones, whereas facultatively anaerobic gram-negative bacteria additionally contain menaquinones and or dimethylmenaquinones. aerobic and facultatively anaerobic gram positive bacteria produce only menaquinones. Strictly anaerobic bacteria lack isopropanide quinones or contain only menaquinones. So hope you are getting into it, and you need to really read word by word and line by line, and I think everything is very clear. Now coming to the bacterial cytochromes. Bacterial cytochromes, they are involved in a wide variety of redox processes such as aerobic and anaerobic respiration and photosynthetic electron transfer. Most cytochromes are associated with the cytoplasmic membrane. Cytochrome C is often absent in both gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria, and enterobacteria can be easily separated from pseudomonads since the former do not contain cytochrome C and are therefore oxidase negative. They are oxidase negative. The cytochrome pattern is also helpful for distinguishing staphylococci, which usually lack cytochrome C and D, from micrococci. Okay, so this was what we understood about the bacterial cytochromes. Now we come further, the ultrastructure and the chemical composition of the cell walls of what? Gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, which are quite different in profile. The cell wall of gram-positive bacteria reveals a single thick and homogeneous layer, whereas gram-negative bacteria have a thinner, distinctly layered cell wall with an outer membrane resembling the typical trilaminar cytoplasmic membrane. The polymers found in the cell walls of these two groups of bacteria are chemically quite different. The walls of gram-negative cells are mainly composed of lipopolysaccharide, phospholipid, protein, lipoprotein, and relatively little peptidoglycan, usually less than 10% of the total cell wall. The gram-positive cells contain peptidoglycan, usually more than 30% of the total cell wall. Polysaccharides or teichoic acid or both, or teichourenic acid as major components. Thus, in contrast to the gram-negative bacteria, the gram-positive bacteria contain hardly any lipids in the cell walls. Therefore, there is, however, one exception, acid-fast bacteria. So, in this we have one exception. What is that? Acid-fast bacteria. They are resistant to decolorization with acidic ethanol after staining with fusion. These acid-fast bacteria, Mycobacterium, Nocardia, and Corynebacterium sensu stricto, are gram-positive bacteria which contain large amounts of lipids in the cell walls. In particular, mycolic acids, high molecular weight, 3-hydroxy acids with a long alkyl branch in position 2. Okay. Now coming next, again very important, what is that? Peptidoglycan, murine. So it is the only, what is it? It is the only cell wall polymer which is found in both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Okay. So it is a heteropolymer which is consisting of glycan strands that are cross-linked through short peptides. The glycan strand is made up of alternating beta-1,4 linked residues of N-acetyl glucosamine and N-acetyl muramic acid, a derivative of glucosamine, and the unique constituent of peptidoglycan. The peptide moiety is linked to N-acetyl muramic acid and contains both L and D amino acids. The peptidoglycan of gram-negative bacteria is remarkably uniform. Gram-positive bacteria, it is containing what? It is containing a multi-layered peptidoglycan and reveal in contrast to gram negative, मतलब ग्राम नेगेटिव ऑर्गेनिजम्स के कॉन्ट्रास्ट में क्या ये रिवील करता है, क्या शो करता है? देयर इज अ ग्रेट वेरिएशन इन द केमिकल कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ द peptidoglycans. So minor variations can be found in the glycan strand. In Mycobacteria endocardia, the N-acetyl group of muramic acid is oxidized to N-glycolil. The greatest variation occurs within the peptide moiety of the peptidoglycan. Both the peptide subunit and the interpeptide bridges which cross-link the peptide subunits can vary in their composition and primary structure. So based on the mode of cross-linkage, two main groups of cross-linkage A and B can be distinguished. Okay. A given peptidoglycan structure is a stable character and fulfills the most important prerequisites of a useful taxonomic marker. So no single step mutations are known so far that lead to an altered peptidoglycan structure. Phenotypic variations are also rather limited and can be easily controlled. Now, chemotaxonomic data are very useful for reliable classification and identification of bacteria and archaea, but they are not sufficient for a comprehensive reconstruction of their phylogeny. Remember, we are studying on the chemical structures, okay, chemotaxonomy. So, but these we cannot reconstruct and we find how the phylogenetic relationship. Therefore, it is not surprising that Stenier et al. In 1970, he wrote in his textbook that for bacteria, the general course of evolution will never be known and there is simply not enough objective evidence to base the classification on phylogenetic grounds. Okay, actually this was what he spoke was in the 1970s. However, in the late 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s, a breakthrough was achieved by Carl Voysey and co-workers when they were able to derive a tree of life consisting of three distinctly different branches: bacteria, archaea and eukarya. This already I have given you in your earlier notes. By comparing first partial, later on complete small subunit ribosome RNA gene sequences. This study revolutionized bacterial taxonomy, and for the first time bacteriologists were able to classify prokaryotes on the basis of their phylogenetic relatedness. In subsequent years, further genotypic studies including comparative large subunit ribosomal RNA gene as well as protein coding gene sequence analysis allowed an even better insight into the relationships of prokaryotes. So more recently, multi-locus sequence analysis (MLSA) has been applied for distinguishing between close related bacterial species. Okay.